Now that Fox's X-Men swan song, Dark Phoenix, has officially bombed in theaters, people are pointing fingers, there's recriminations at the studios, and fans are left wondering what went wrong. And I'm going to point out 3 critical mistakes that led to that film's downfall. Coming up next. I have to say, I truly love the X-Men film franchise and have since the first one. It was a great moment in cinema history for comic book fans. And as the franchise has grown tired and I've become disenchanted with it, I still love that they put out those movies because there's always some interesting elements of comic adaptation, even in the worst of the franchise. But that's why I was so especially shocked at how bad I thought X-Men Dark Phoenix was. I find a lot to love about every X-Men movie, including X3 and including X-Men Origins Wolverine. I mean, that actually did have a lot of cool stuff, a lot of fun stuff, a lot of comic book adaptation stuff. And I think that is found to be lacking in X-Men Dark Phoenix. I think from what you can tell, it's the worst of the X-Men movies. And I think it made 3 critical mistakes. Obviously, it made much more than that, but 3 critical mistakes that made it doomed from the start. And for starters, I would start with the shallowest of those reasons, the special effects. Like I said, X-Men Origins Wolverine, a jumbled mess narratively, but it had a lot of really, nice payoffs as far as the mutant superpowered action. I think that director, Gavin Hood, could have done a much better job had he had more time to get the script into shape if Fox, the studio, wasn't rushing him through the process. But with X-Men Dark Phoenix, it's just not the case. Part of that is because of Simon Kinberg, a rookie director who clearly doesn't have the type of vision that a Bryan Singer has, that a Matthew Vaughn has, even a Brett Ratner. All of them had great moments of cinematic drama where their artistic directing techniques really paid off on the visuals. And so much of Dark Phoenix is filmed in a very lackluster fashion. And it's interesting because there's a lot of scenes in that movie that have already happened in other scenes in the X-Men franchise, and they're clearly not done as well. Obviously, X3, there's several Phoenix moments, and several of them are vastly superior in X3. And clearly, Kinberg just doesn't have the type of top-shelf visual capabilities as far as setting up a scene and conveying that drama. There were a lot of moments that just should have been more emotionally wrought. When I think about some of the emotion that Matthew Vaughn conveyed in X-Men First Class, that movie had its faults, but there are some moments of just amazing drop-dead drama. Magneto doing his Nazi hunting in Switzerland and in South America. Obviously his origin scene, the scene with the coin, where he moves the coin to Kevin Bacon's detriment. Those scenes were so powerful in their cinema magic. And there was, I couldn't really think of a scene that had that in Dark Phoenix. There were a couple effective moments, but they were really few and far between. And really the issue wasn't them. It was how many moments really stuck out as not being effective moments. There was Nightcrawler, a moment where he does his super bamf, where he is teleporting rapidly. And of course, again, that's something that was done in X2, X-Men United. And when you look at how Bryan Singer laid out that scene, the visual clarity of the spatial awareness that he gives the audience, the economy and laser focus on shot layout to make sure that every character, every action, every beat of action in that moment is seen clearly on screen is easy for the audience to follow. I thought that a lot of that scene in the train in the finale was very difficult to follow, and a lot of it was pretty uninspired. A few really cool shots here and there, but that's just about it. I mean, I thought it was, all you can say is it was a disappointing film visually. Moving on to number 2, the fumbling of the Dark Phoenix plotline, as well as doubling down on the X3 version of that plotline. Of course, a lot of this movie has already been done before. It was done in the third X-Men film, X3, X-Men The Last Stand. And Simon Kinberg was a writer on that film. Now, that film has a pretty bad reputation among the fans. I think it's a little bit more complex than that. I think that there's a lot of things that were done very effectively in that film. And those things are overshadowed because of what was done so poorly. Now, the problem is, what was done so poorly was the Jean Grey Phoenix part of that story. And apparently, that must have been Simon Kinberg's contribution to the film. He was only one of the writers, because that is pretty much what Dark Phoenix was. Dark Phoenix was X3, but with the rest of the storyline, the Cure, Magneto's army, those elements stripped out, and just that version of Jean's origin and going into the Phoenix. Of course, there's a few changes, but people knew this going in. From the very first trailer, when we see Jean Grey in that car accident where she appears to cause that, it had complete echoes of what the implications were about Jean's past from X-Men 3, X-Men Last Stand. And so we've known for a while that seemed to be what the approach was. And I was just so stunned at how much he doubled down on that. Even though he meaning Simon Kinberg, the writer-director, was bringing a space element and the Phoenix Force into the plot line. That was really the only change. But it was a change that was never going to satisfy fans, because it's more than just having something from space and aliens come. It was the whole story of the Shi'ar Empire and this, space opera level story of Lilandra coming to Earth and Professor X, getting and thus his team getting involved in this. Obviously some of that would have to have been cut out for a 2-hour movie, but I found it shocking they cut the Shi'ar out completely. They used the Dabari, which are, involved peripherally, but most people don't associate with that story at all. And so it was amazing at how Simon Kinberg doubled down on the one thing that people were generally pretty consistently in agreement on about X-Men The Last Stand, was that the whole Jean origin and Phoenix origin did not really resonate with anyone. And it's ironic. It's almost as if Simon Kinberg said, "Oh, it was all that other stuff that screwed up my great story idea," and somehow, in an amazing twist of fate, he convinced a studio to let him remake that movie at a cost of $200 million and remake the worst parts of that movie. It's just an absolutely stunning development. I'm speechless. I can't believe that movie, and I cannot believe the creative decisions that he made. And man, shame on you, Fox, for that whole process, letting all of his pitches, his drafts. At no point someone said, this isn't working. You're using the worst part that everybody hated from X-Men: The Last Stand, one of our more reviled movies. So it was baffling, his decisions. And usually I can latch on to a few nuggets here and there, and with Dark Phoenix, I struggle. There's a couple moments that I thought were really great, but you struggle to find them in that movie. And the third reason why X-Men Dark Phoenix was doomed for failure, it totally took a crap on the legacy and continuity of the Fox X-Men movie franchise. It had glaring continuity errors, and I'm not talking about the kind because of the time shifting and the young cast versus new cast and whether they've aged or not aged or whatever. I mean, I think to an extent that stuff's a little nitpicky for me. I'm talking about character and thematic connections, things that have been at the heart of that franchise, at the heart of the X-Men mythos, and completely just discarded. And I think among the examples you can look at, the most critical is the catalyst for Mystique turning against Charles. And the catalyst is that he has become a fame whore, that he likes hobnobbing with the president and powerful people, and that is why, and he likes having his name in the papers and the fame, the celebrity, and that's why he's having the X-Men do all this. And it was such an affront to the character, but more than that, it's really an affront to the entire franchise. There's a scene in Dark Phoenix. The X-Men are returning from space, and they return to a hero's welcome with people cheering and holding signs and thanking them, and even kids in blue makeup to either be Beast or Raven or whatever. I forget at the moment, but I watched that, and I thought, as a person who's been around since the beginning and loves all of the X-Men movies, I was so struck by that, because if you go back to the first movie, or the first two movies really, but really the first movie, they had, it was a central part of that storyline, that there was the Mutant Registration Act that was going through Congress, and there were anti-mutant protesters. So basically, this film franchise starts with anti-mutant protesters out in the streets, a clear indication of where at least some of the public opinion is regarding mutant bigotry. And as time went on, finally with X3, there's starting to become some acceptance. Beast becomes a liaison to the White House. But I couldn't believe it when I saw Dark Phoenix and they're coming back from space and everybody was out there with signs cheering. It was just, I thought, oh my God, this is so awesome. What a beautiful coda to what happened in the very first movie, to see that, yes, Charles's dream has been working. They've been moving public opinion. I just thought that was an amazing moment. And then literally the next scene after that, Raven says that, I'm mad at you, Charles, because you only put the X-Men in danger because it makes you famous and powerful and you're an egotist. That is categorically, just on its own, that scene right there, what Raven says is an absolute antithesis to everything that the film franchise has been about. In one scene, Simon Kinberg has attempted to completely illegitimate the entire film franchise except for his movie. I'm just still stunned at that. And, to people who say, oh, well, it's good for characters to, for us to explore their dark sides, like, to see the negative side of what Charles may be doing, how he's putting people in danger or whatever. And that's actually true. That's very valid from a writer's standpoint, from a story and character standpoint. I look at it like with Luke from Star Wars Last Jedi. I actually disagree with most fans that I think, seeing this character in a negative light, that can be very creatively interesting. That can make for some very interesting drama and story possibilities. And you really do need to sometimes push characters into new directions. However, I thought it was very ham-fisted in how they did it there. So it was interesting. A lot of people complained about that. I didn't complain about the base idea of doing it. And same thing here. I don't complain about possibly exploring that dark side of Charles and how he may not be as careful as he should be, and to explore the tension of the responsibility he has for the caretaking of these kids, even though as he's trying to send them out into these very life-threatening situations across the globe. The problem is how they did it. This is not the way to do it. You can't do that by simply saying everything that you've been doing for 12 films previous, everything that you've been fighting for. Now, I think that that's just something that's a selfish thing that you do to get on CNN. I mean, it is so offensive to what they have been doing for how many straight films. I should have looked up how many was on there. X3, the quadrilogy. You know, we're at about, over 10 with Deadpool and Wolverine. And granted, some of those don't cover it, but certainly with the core X-Men franchise, the entire franchise has been about the X-Men fighting for humanity to gain their acceptance. And that goes back to the basic comics. If you're an old school X-Men comic fan, you'll remember fighting to protect a world that fears them. I believe that, I'm just going off the top of my head, but I believe that was the tagline, like on the first page of an X-Men comic back in the 70s and 80s or 60s as well. I collected mainly in the 70s and 80s. But that was something lifted straight from the comic books and was a key tenet of the film franchise from beginning to end until Simon Kinberg assumed full control over that franchise. And he just twisted it and distorted it to have a dramatic moment, which I don't blame him for trying to have a dramatic moment, but it was a lazy and cheap and wholly ineffective way to do that. And I think it just, for me, it absolutely torpedoed, my suspension of disbelief for this story. I was trying to play catch up to what was going on for the rest of the movie, and I'm just still shocked about it. I mean, I know that Kinberg wasn't involved in X-Men 1 or 2. I think it's the only one he wasn't involved in, but I can't believe it. This movie was doomed to fail. It had a lot of problems with it, but I believe that these are 3 critical reasons why it was. I don't know. You tell me. What do you think? Did I make some sense? Was I right on some, wrong on others? Let me know in the comments. Please consider liking and subscribing, and we'll see you here next time on Hero Journalism.